Dress watch. A dress watch is the simplest object a watchmaker can produce, and that's the point. Thin case, no numerals, leather strap, nothing that competes with a suit jacket cuff. The thinner the watch, the more it costs to make, because fitting a movement into a case under 7 millimeters requires components ground to tolerances invisible to the naked eye. Patek Philippe's Calatrava, introduced in 1932, became the defining template. The rule for wearing one is that you shouldn't notice it's there. Most people buying luxury dress watches today are buying something their phone already does better. The watch industry knows this and leans into it. These aren't tools anymore. They're arguments about taste. Dive watch. The dive watch was built for one job, not killing you underwater. The crown screws down to prevent water intrusion. The bezel only rotates counterclockwise, so if you accidentally knock it, your air supply reading goes shorter, never longer. The Rolex Submariner, introduced in 1953, was rated to 100 meters. Modern versions go to 300 or deeper. ISO 6425 is the certification standard. A watch can only be called a diver if it survives 125% of its rated depth. Most people who own dive watches have never been diving. The design is so resolved that it hasn't meaningfully changed in 70 years, which is why it became the most copied watch silhouette in history. Pilot watch. Pilot watches grew out of a specific problem. A pilot's hands are occupied. The solution was a large dial, oversized crown operable with gloves on, and extremely legible numerals, often Arabic with a sandwich dial construction that makes them pop in low cockpit light. The IWC Big Pilot and Breitling Navitimer defined the category. The Navitimer's bezel is a slide rule that can calculate fuel consumption, airspeed, and climb rate, a feature almost no owner uses anymore. Early aviation watches also had anti-magnetic properties because cockpit instruments interfere with iron-based movements. The big crown became an aesthetic signature long after its practical reason disappeared. Field watch. The field watch came out of the First World War, when officers needed to coordinate attacks with both hands free. Before that, pocket watches were standard issue. The wristwatch became military equipment practically overnight between 1914 and 1918. Field watches are defined by a matte dial to prevent sun glare, luminous hands, Arabic numerals, and a case tough enough to survive being thrown against a trench wall. The Hamilton Khaki and Seiko SNK are modern descendants of that lineage. The NATO strap, a single piece of nylon threaded under the watch, was developed so the watch stayed on the wrist even if one of the spring bars broke during combat. Chronograph. A chronograph is a stopwatch built into a watch. 2 pushers. One starts and stops, one resets. The complication was first patented in 1816 by Louis Moynet, originally to track astronomical objects. By the mid-20th century, it was on every racing driver's wrist. The Omega Speedmaster was NASA's choice for the Apollo program, not because it was the most sophisticated watch submitted for testing, but because it survived heat, vacuum, humidity, and shock better than every competitor. It went to the moon in 1969 strapped to Buzz Aldrin's spacesuit. A monopusher chronograph uses one button for all functions, start, stop, reset in sequence, and is considered more mechanically elegant and significantly harder to make. Tourbillon. The tourbillon was invented in 1801 by Abraham Louis Breguet to solve a real problem that no longer exists. In the era of pocket watches, gravity acting on a stationary movement caused accuracy to drift. Breguet's solution was to mount the escapement and balance wheel in a rotating cage that completes 1 revolution per minute, averaging out the gravitational error. Wristwatches, which rotate constantly on the wrist, don't have this problem. The tourbillon is now purely a demonstration of skill, a watchmaker's equivalent of a surgeon suturing with their non-dominant hand. A flying tourbillon removes the upper bridge so the cage appears to float. The most expensive watches in the world are almost always tourbillons. GMT Watch. A GMT watch displays 2 time zones simultaneously using a 4th hand that completes 1 rotation every 24 hours against a corresponding bezel. The Rolex GMT Master was commissioned by Pan American Airways in 1954 for its pilots flying the new transatlantic routes. The original had a red and blue bezel nicknamed the Pepsi. The 2-tone bezel was functional, blue for nighttime hours, red for daytime, so a pilot could tell at a glance whether it was day or night in the second time zone without doing mental arithmetic. As commercial aviation became ordinary, the Greenwich Mean Time watch moved from cockpits to boardrooms, and today it's one of the most sought-after references in the secondary watch market. Skeleton watch. Skeletonizing a watch means cutting away every gram of material from the movement plates that isn't structurally necessary, then finishing the remaining metal by hand so it's presentable. The goal is to see the movement working. It adds nothing to function and makes the watch harder to service. Jaeger-LeCoultre and Audemars Piguet have produced some of the most celebrated skeleton movements since the mid-20th century. The finishing work alone, anglage, perlage, Geneva stripes, can take hundreds of hours on a single movement. A skeletonized watch on a leather strap in a dark room catches candlelight in a way that photographs can't fully explain. That's what people are paying for.